What if what we call public opinion was just a manufactured narrative that makes it easier to convince people that if their views are different, then there's something wrong with that, or there's something wrong with them?
Spending is a tax. As soon as the government spends money, eventually it's a tax. Sometimes we put a direct tax on the people, sometimes we borrow the money, and sometimes we print the money.
Freedom and the dignity of the individual have been more available and assured here than in any other place on earth.
The Patrick Riggins Show. And now your host, Patrick Riggins.
All right, Deal with the Devil. A little pop evil there. To start off the show, we try to play a different song every week to lead into the show, and I think this one hits the mark on what we talk about a lot on here. Government. It's sort of a deal with the devil. You have to always keep your eye on it, and to be honest, we'd be better off with as little as we can get away with. But before I get off on a tangent, let me welcome you to the Patrick Riggins Show. Thank you for tuning in again this week. For you new listeners, what you're going to hear this next hour, you'll probably not hear anywhere else. Not on television, nor radio, not even satellite radio. This show is the crown jewel of the Libertarian Lighthouse Radio Network, on which you will hear the best elucidation of the original true American values of freedom and liberty. Pure, clean, clear, and unspoiled. That's what you get when you drink from the headwaters of the river of freedom and liberty. Oh, and before I forget, we're here on our charter radio station, News Talk 98.7 WOKI in Knoxville, Tennessee. You're listening to the voice of freedom and liberty that the government and its apostles have told you not to listen to. Don't pay any attention to that man speaking of freedom and liberty. You don't want any of that. Look, you're free. You have liberty. All you have to do is claim it. And all you need to do that is vote in people who will take it back from the government. That's it. But we have to get these people to run for office, and then more importantly, get them voted in. Getting back to my original thought for a moment, that of being government is kind of a deal with the devil. Unfortunately, we had to form some sort of body to deal with everyone from outside this country. And that's the federal government. That's what we did. But if you think about it, we really don't need it for anything else. I've pointed out on this show before, there isn't anything in this country that isn't also located within a state. So why do we need the federal government dealing with anything inside the country? The states can handle whatever is within their borders quite nicely. Whenever I make this argument, I get people screaming, "But Patrick, what about slavery? Some states had slavery and others didn't. Do you really want to go back to that?" Now, these people are the ones who are sleeping in history class. Or they weren't taught the truth in the first place. Slavery existed because the federal government enabled it. It's written into our Constitution. And the Constitution created the federal government. The very document creating this Leviathan we're dealing with today contained within it laws concerning slavery. One of which is Article 4, Section 2, and I've got it right here. No person held to service or labor in one state, under the laws thereof, escaping into another, shall, in consequence of any law or regulation therein, be discharged from such service or labor, but shall be delivered up on claim of the party to whom such service and labor may be due. Now, this was undone by amendment, but it was still in the original document. And what it means is if you were a slave and escaped to another state, you shall be turned over to your owner if they come a-calling. So no, states' rights isn't about going back to slavery. In fact, many states chose to nullify federal laws and rulings regarding slaves. They ignored federal legislation validating slave laws. It's the same thing some states are doing now concerning Obamacare. They're voting to nullify federal laws within their state. They're also doing it concerning the legalization of marijuana and some federal gun laws. And you say, Patrick, what if the state in which I'm living is doing something I don't agree with? What then? I shouldn't have to move to a state that is. Well, if we're living according to freedom and liberty, then the state won't be doing something like that. The government won't have any say-so in how you live your life. As long as you aren't infringing on someone else's rights, well, you can do whatever you want. I've said it before. Sums it up very nicely. Mind your own business and keep your hands to yourself. Speaking of government, I want to address something I've been hearing lately now that Obamacare is being activated. All of these people are complaining about how can it be right for the government to require us to buy medical insurance? I can't afford it, and I can't afford the fine either. Where has all this complaining been while we've been forced to be buying mandatory retirement insurance? You've been forced to purchase Social Security for almost 100 years now. The government is not really doing anything now. It hasn't been doing since the last century. You may not want to participate. You may think you can save your money better than the government can, but you aren't given that option. If you work, you get that money taken out before you even get paid. The first person in line for your paycheck is the United States government. And in a lot of states, that's the second person in line, is your state government. And in a lot of localities, it's your local government. So after the government gets through with your paycheck, then you're allowed to keep whatever they decide you can keep. And isn't that nice of them? Isn't it nice how government gets to force you to pay it for services you may not need or even want? I mentioned it last week. It's like going to the store and having to buy beets. I don't like beets. I don't want beets. Well, too bad you have to buy beets. You aren't given any choice in the matter. I have something else while we're on Obamacare. We had a story come up this week. The Republicans have announced that while they don't want to see Obamacare implemented, hey, they do like parts of it and would like to incorporate them into their own plan. Now, Michael Gerson, he's a former speech writer for President George W. Bush. On Friday, he wrote, urging Republicans to start thinking along these lines of what kind of health care policy they could create as opposed to simply how they'd tear down the existing one. He wrote, in a theoretical post-Obamacare period, a Republican plan should offer a universal credit to anyone who's not covered by a large employer. It should also include protections for those without insurance from, quote, catastrophic expenses. Now, this is from a Republican, someone from the party that states they're for limited government. For you regular listeners to this show, this comes as no surprise. I was telling you this last year when Romney was cooking up the same thing. Here's two of his quotes.
I say we're going to replace Obamacare, and I'm replacing it with my own plan. I'm not getting rid of all of health care reform. Of course, there are a number of things that I like in health care reform that I'm going to put in place.
Everyone was asking, why did the Republicans cave on the shutdown? It's because they're all part of this government religion, this devotion to all things government. They love to meddle. They love to fiddle around with things in the country. They have the right idea. They have all the answers. They are the ones who have to take care of everyone else. You can't do it. You simply aren't able. You're too stupid to figure out how to take care of yourself. Never mind, your ancestors did it since the beginning of time. I don't think they realized that when Europeans started coming to this country, there wasn't any welfare. There weren't any housing subsidies. Yet somehow people still survived and even prospered. Now, all of a sudden, over the last 100 years or so, government thinks Americans have become idiots and unable to care for themselves or others. Now, I've said this over and over. This isn't about Democrats versus Republicans. It's about government versus the people. I don't care which side of the aisle they sit on. All of these people sitting in Congress think they can do it better than you can. And there really isn't anything wrong with that. It's just when they get around to trying to prove it to us. All right, we're up on the first break of this seemingly short hour on the Patrick Regan Show. When we return, we'll have some more NSA spying news, and we'll talk about morality and government and some other stuff before we run out of time this week. When we come back, do we have our music coming up, Jay? I think he's scrammed. There it goes. I either caught him napping or he's watching a football game. One of those two. When we come back up here on the Patrick Regan Show, here on the Libertarian Lighthouse Radio Network, we'll be back. Join us after this break.